Midweek Murders contains graphic and explicit content. Listener discretion is advised.
It was interesting to me. Should we start, maybe? Now that I've regaled you with this exciting story. It's not going to be in the episode. You don't need to worry.
It's not me that I'm worried for, it's the poor listeners.
You were riveted the whole time. I don't meet anyone. I don't see anyone.
Let me have this, okay?
I had to get it all out, okay? It's Wednesday, which means that it's time to talk about crime. You're listening to Midweek Murders, and I'm Sandra.
And I'm Joe.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animals.
Yeah, I was pretty non-enthusiastic.
Well, we're in fucking tier 4, which is a made-up name for lockdown, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I have no enthusiasm. I'm sorry. Oh, it's not gonna be Christmas for me. Well, I'm gonna make a bit of a Christmas. I'm not an idiot. I know what you have to do to keep your mental health in check. Put up shitloads of fairy lights so it looks like the Grinch spilled all of his loot everywhere, and then you force your mind to think, look at the pretty lights.
Do you need help?
Always. Okay, so this week we're going to talk about the murder of Isabella Roxton and Mary Jane Rogerson. I got my information from Wikipedia, the most comprehensive Wikipedia post there ever was, recommended. An article in Gettysburg Times from 1935, and an article from Ottawa Citizen from 1936.
I got mine from Wikipedia and my brain.
Let's see what's in there then, shall we?
Both non-reputable sources of information. Please always check your sources.
Yep. So Isabella Roxton was in a relationship with a doctor named Buck, although they refer to each other as husband and wife. And the couple lived in Lancaster in Lancashire with their 3 children. The house they lived in was also where Buck had his medical practice, and the couple had a maid and live-in nanny named Mary Jane Rogerson. Buck was an unstable sort of bloke who regularly True story, bruh. Who regularly exploded into fits of rage or bouts of hysteria and self-pity. That's a quote from the Wikipedia page. Reportedly because he had become paranoid about his relationship with Isabella, but probably because he was just that kind of bloke. He was a typical abuser who would beat Isabella, and Isabella in turn would leave him, and then Buck would cry and beg for her to return, offering promises of changed behavior. In 1934, a Lancaster police officer had been called to the Roxton's house following another instance of domestic abuse, at which point Buck made a threat to his wife's life. At this point, which is quite incredulous, he was not arrested or anything. It seems like nothing happened. It didn't say what happened, but I'm guessing nothing happened. On the 14th of September the following year, Isabella had been in Blackpool to visit 2 of her sisters and to attend a yearly light festival. She returned to the couple's home in Lancaster at approximately 11:30 in the evening. At the home, Buck murdered her and the nanny Mary Jane, supposedly because she either had been there when the murder of Isabella was committed or because he had found Buck with Isabella's body. They're not sure. One day before the murders had taken place, Buck had informed one of the 2 part-time cleaners that worked for the couple not to come to the house until the 16th. And as an explanation, he had told her that Isabella and Mary Jane had gone to Edinburgh. Edinburgh? Edinburgh, which does...
Edinburgh? They went to Edinburgh.
Which does imply that he had planned to murder both Isabella and Mary Jane. That's my editorializing. I don't know if that's true, but I felt like it was weird that he had made an explanation about them going away the day before he committed the murders.
Pretty suspicious.
Yeah. On the day after the murders, he visited one of his patients, who he asked for assistance from both her and her husband to help him prepare for the decorators that he claimed had been arranged for months previously and were arriving that morning. And I'm like, is that something you ask of one of your patients?
I guess it depends on how healthy they are. If they're a 96-year-old man, then perhaps you don't invite them round to do the heavy lifting, but if they're in the prime of their life, why not take advantage of that?
But as a patient, I would be like, no, this transgresses our professional relationship.
Well, I can see who would never get asked for help.
Well, I would do it if it was one of my close friends. But my doctor, I would be like, no. But this was in the 1930s, so I guess everybody knew everyone in a way. He claimed that he could not do this himself, as he had hurt his hand opening a tin can of fruit, like a little bitch.
I hurt my hand cutting up my debit card, and I'm debilitated. So...
And then Joe cut his hand cutting up a debit card like a little bitch.
Well, I'm glad you're amused.
You bleed a lot from your hand.
I don't clot very well, so it just keeps on opening up and bleeding everywhere.
Oh, God. Put a little bit of Vaseline on that.
I want to stop it bleeding, not lubricate it to stick in somewhere.
Buck's patient, Mrs. Hampshire, recalled that the house was in a state of disarray. All the carpeting had been removed from the stairs, and straw were littered all over the floors. Oh, burp.
I thought you were pausing for dramatic effect. Not straw on the floor?
What are we, in a barn?
Does this look like a livery to you?
Rolls and rolls of carpet were all over the place, including in the garden, where she also noticed several burned towels. Mrs. Hampshire...
You did that in your newsreader voice.
No, I was trying to be funny.
Rolls and rolls of carpet were found in the garden. More on this story at 9 o'clock.
Oh, God. I'm acting, okay?
You try to be funny, and you turn into Sir Trevor MacDonald.
Story of my life. Mrs. Hampshire and her husband were given rolls of stained stair carpeting. What a gift!
Thank you for being such wonderful customers. I mean, patients. Here's some bloody carpet.
As well as Buck's stained suit. But we're expected to clean these.
No. The best part of this is he gave them some used carpet and a used, dirty, bloody, stained suit and said to them, you can keep them if you clean them. Thanks, Buck. You know, I've always wanted a bit of carpet, actually. Yeah, I was just take it down to the dry cleaners, get it cleaned up, and then pop it on the mantelpiece. Yeah, just what we wanted, Buck. Thanks, mate. Fucking arsehole.
First they have to go to his house, and then as a payment...
You know, Buck, we live in a bungalow.
Is that suit even Mrs. Hampshire's husband's size? We will never know. Oh God. It's so stupid. After a couple of days, Buck visited Mary Jane's parents, claiming that Mary Jane had fallen pregnant and that Isabella had traveled somewhere with her to arrange an abortion. For those of you who don't know, abortions were illegal in Britain, and Buck used this to urge the Rogersons not to talk to the police. He himself went to the police, though, with a story about Isabella having left him. The Rogersons were worried about their daughter and went to the Roxton's home.
And he paid them off with some bloody carpet. I'll give you some carpet if you don't tell anyone.
Here's a shit suit. To find out more about where their daughter was, at which point Buck claimed that Isabella and Mary Jane had stolen 30 pounds from a safe and would surely return when they ran out of money. This obviously made the Rogersons suspicious, as it contradicted the story Buck had told them previously, and they decided to go to the police to file a missing persons report. More than 2 weeks after the murders had taken place, Susan Haynes Johnson was walking across an old stone bridge when she noticed a wrapped bundle with a decomposed human arm sticking out of it on the embankment of the stream below. The police were called, and after confirming that the arm had belonged to a human, they conducted an extensive search of the surrounding area and the nearby river. During the search, they found 2 heads and 4 further wrapped bundles containing body parts. And these bundles were wrapped in clothing, as I understand it, no?
Bed sheets, a pillowcase, children's clothing, and some newspapers, which all become quite important later.
Oh, yeah. This is probably the time where I'm going to ask you about the evidence.
Oh, how very interesting. So they found about 70 different pieces of human remains, which they linked back to all originating from 2 individual people. They could work out that it was 2 individual people because obviously they had things like 4 thigh bones. And unless they're a quadruped, which they couldn't have been because they identified them as human, you said that earlier. So they worked out that the 2 people were of differing heights, which would have been done by things like the length of their thigh bones, but you can also determine that from arm bone length and so on. They also worked out that the bodies had been dismembered by someone with extensive anatomical knowledge. And the reason being, it's supposedly almost impossible to dismember a human body at the joints with a knife without knowing the anatomy behind the body. And I assume it's things like ligaments and tendons and things like that, and knowing where to cut. All of the body parts were found with certain body parts removed, and all of the parts that were removed were things that would have been used as key identifiers in being able to match the body to a person. So eyes, ears, some parts of their skin, their teeth, fingerprints, so anything that could have been used to positively identify that body had been removed, which again... Whoa, hold on, mate, you're shouting.
Oh, sorry.
Fucking teeth!
I did read that dental person, what is it called?
Dentist.
A dental person.
Oh god, it's been a long week for you, isn't it?
Hasn't it just? A dentist did identify some of the work on the teeth.
Yeah, so after they had made semi-positive identification of the bodies, they got in touch with a local dentist who did confirm that some of the work that was done on the teeth that remained was work that he had carried out. So the idea behind Buck removing the teeth would have been to try and reduce the ease of being able to match the evidence that was left with dental records.
Yeah.
But obviously he didn't manage to remove all of the teeth of significance because, like you say, it was matched by a dentist saying, yes, I've carried out this work. This is mine. I've done this.
I think you mean a dental person.
A dental person did manage to confirm that they had done some teeth work on these people. The fusion of the skulls showed that one of the victims was between the age of 30 and 55, probably more likely to be between 35 and 45, and one was much younger at 18 to 25, or more likely to be 20 or 21. And they can tell that because when you age, you've got certain plates in your skull that will fuse together after time. So when you're a baby, you actually have way more bones in your body than you do as an adult. So an adult has 206 bones. That's a fun fact for you. But a child or a baby will have a lot more than that because bones like their skull won't have fused together yet.
They're not fully fused.
Not fully fused.
I think they also managed to, because of the newspapers that the body parts were wrapped in, they managed to pinpoint a location of where...
Oh, yeah. See, that was a big boo-boo on Buck's part. That was beautifully alliterative, if I do say so myself.
I'm not technically a writer.
So like we said earlier, all of the body parts were wrapped in either bed sheets, children's clothing, or newspapers. And we said that that would all become significant later, and that later is now. Thanks for sticking with us. So the newspapers were a special edition that were only published on the 15th of September in Morecambe and Lancaster.
Yeah.
So Buck, you fucking idiot, didn't use a generic newspaper to wrap the body parts in. He used an incredibly specific one that was incredibly easy to narrow down the location of where these bodies were wrapped, not necessarily where the murders took place or anything more than that at this stage.
It did narrow it down, yeah.
Yeah, they narrowed it down to 2 towns, Morecambe or Lancaster. The bed sheets were examined by a forensic textiles expert.
I didn't know that existed in the 1930s. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, the examination process was just microscopy, so it really is just someone that knows how to look at fibres under a microscope. But they found that all of the samples of bedsheet that were used to wrap the bodies had the exact same unique flaw in the threading. So that will be that something in the manufacturing process has caused this flaw. So usually it will be some kind of machinery that's got a specific dent in it, or a sewing machine that punches a different space every 5th punch, something innocuous like that. But when you look at it in terms of the bigger picture, it's really easy to be able to spot that when you're comparing textile fibers. They compared that to the bed sheets in the Ruxton's master bedroom and, surprise, surprise, found exactly the same flaw in the bed sheets as they did with the bed sheets that were used to wrap the bodies.
Did you have anything more about the autopsies?
So while they were undertaking the autopsy for the first batch of body parts, a further bundle was found.
Oh, was it?
Yes. This one contained the forearms of the victims with the hands still attached. He hadn't managed to completely remove the fingerprints from the hands for this second bundle, and they managed to get a full fingerprint from one of the hands, which they later managed to match to some items in the house that Mary Jane would have normally handled. So given that she was the maid, it could have been cleaning utensils or things in the kitchen or something like that. So they positively matched the fingerprint from the house to that of the hand. So they knew, at least in this second bundle, that parts of the body belonged to Mary Jane.
Yeah.
While they were conducting the autopsy, they found that the older body had 5 stab wounds to the chest, multiple broken bones, including the hyoid bone, which is a little one in your neck. So she had been strangled. And whether that was the actual cause of death or whether that was just to subdue her while he did whatever else he did, they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The younger body had severe signs of blunt force trauma on the limbs and the head. And again, they're not sure if that was the cause of death. And the reason they're not sure that these were the ultimate cause of death was because of a combination of the decay of the bodies. So they'd already started decaying by the time they found them, and the fact that the bodies were completely mutilated.
Mm-hmm.
They also brought in a forensic entomologist, which in the 1930s was breaking ground.
Yeah, I was like, that's so interesting because it feels like a new study. I know it's not.
Yeah, forensic entomology has obviously been around for a long time now.
Yeah.
And when I was being taught forensics, it was an incredibly useful tool to be able to date time of death. For anybody who doesn't know what forensic entomology is, it's looking at things like flies and
maggots and
beetles and maggots, and their life cycles in comparison to when a body could have died.
Yeah, and nowadays they can be so exact, can't they?
There's a big problem with entomology being used as a time of death marker.
Oh.
And the problem is the environment.
Yeah.
So the way that forensic entomology works is they will find, and I'm going to use blue bottle flies because they're the most common in the UK to be used, and they are the first insect on site of a dead body.
Mm-hmm.
Quite interestingly, a blue bottle fly can detect dead meat, whether that be human or animal, from 10 miles away.
Oh, God, that's so far.
That is a pretty impressive nose for a little tiny fly.
Oh, yeah.
So what will happen is the forensic entomologist will examine the body and identify whether there are any maggots, whether there are any pupae or larvae. Basically,
I didn't know it was called pupae.
What did you think it was called?
I don't know. The Swedish word for it is pupa, which is...
So they'll look for any pupa. So yeah, they'll look for any insects and whatever stage of their development cycle they're in. They will identify the exact species that they found on the body, and either through reference material or through their own growing cycle, they will determine at what stage the body will have died.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the stage of the development of the insect. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem comes when you introduce external factors. Yeah. So it's all well and good doing this at room temperature. If you dry the air, so you reduce the humidity, it dries out the body, the cadaver, and so there's less food available for the flies and the maggots, so it will take them longer to develop their growth cycle. So to give you a comparison, a body that's been hanged versus a body that's been stabbed and has died prone on the floor, mm-hmm. you will get the maggot stage quicker on the body that's been on the floor than you will to the body that's been hanged. So entomology would give them a rough time frame, and then they'd use other techniques to be able to determine it. But given that entomology was groundbreaking at the time, they wouldn't have had any of the further technology. And one of the biggest problems with entomology is submerged bodies, which is the case with this. They were found in the river. A lot of the species that they look at to determine time of death in entomology don't lay their eggs underwater.
But I also read that they could pinpoint the approximate days when they think that this crime happened, no?
Yes, I think they said that it was not possible for the bodies to have been discarded before the 14th of September. So they gave an approximation of when they could have been put there, which matches with the paper because that was published on the 15th. Mm-hmm. But they couldn't say, like they can nowadays, that this person died 72 hours ago.
Yeah. So on the 9th of October, police visited the Rogersons because they had filed the missing persons report and showed them the pieces of clothing that the body parts had been wrapped in and asked them if they recognized any of them. Mrs. Rogerson instantly identified the blouse as having belonged to her daughter, as it had been mended underneath one of the armpits, and she recognized the patchwork. They couldn't say whether the children's romper belonged to the Roxtons, but told police that they needed to talk to Edith Holm, who Isabella, Mary Jane, and the Roxtons' children had been staying with at one point. Edith positively identified the romper as she had been the one to buy it for one of the Roxton's children. On the same day as the police had managed to identify the pieces of clothing, Buck once again visited the Lancaster police. There he lamented about the supposed rumors flying around after the body parts had been discovered about it being Isabella and Mary Jane. He cried and complained about the rumors being detrimental to his medical practice and his general reputation, like a little bitch. He told them to conduct discreet inquiries into his wife and nanny's whereabouts and demanded that they search his home to put an end to these rumors, like a little bitch. The police placated him, although they had already figured out what had happened, as they had talked to his cleaner, who, as we said, had seen the mess the house was in after the murders, and been told all about the excuse about Mary Jane and Isabella being away and stuff like that. And she had been specifically asked to clean the yellow-stained bathtub. They had also talked to Buck's patient, Mrs. Hampshire, who, as we talked about, had seen the rolls of carpet and been given rolls of carpet and the suit. So Buck was arrested on the 12th of October, at which point he pinned a note to the entrance to his medical practice stating, "Remain faithful to me in this hour. I am an innocent victim of circumstances," like a little bitch. When the police asked him to account for his whereabouts between the 14th and 29th of September, Buck gave them a document he had written titled "My Movements." Not suspicious at all.
I think it's particularly helpful.
It's incredibly stupid.
It's very Art Attack. Here's one I prepared earlier.
The police had found extensive traces of bloodstains in the Roxton's home, even though it had been cleaned and redecorated. They also found human fat and body tissue in the drains that led from the bathtub. When they managed to link the fingerprints, as we said, to Mary Jane, because of the dusting of the household items, Buck was formally charged with her murder on the 13th. After being read the charge, Buck said, "Most empathically not. Of course not. The furthest thing from my mind. What motive and why? What are you talking about?" And I'm sure there was no Oscar whispers surrounding Buck's performance. Sorry.
What a bitch.
What a little bit. I've amused myself. Almost a month later, after an X-ray of one of the skulls had been positively matched to a photo of Isabella using forensic anthropology, Buck was formally charged with the murder of Isabella as well. This is a bit confusing to me. I've seen Bones, the TV show.
I've seen Bones. I know what they look like.
I don't know if you've seen that, but it's a forensic anthropologist, probably, that works in like a museum. It went on for way too many seasons. I don't remember all of it, but she works for a museum to date like skeletons and stuff. And then she works extra as a consultant, I guess, to the police that solves cases and shit. It was a quite good series, I think. I don't remember that much about it.
That good.
But I know that they can now take a skull and they know exactly what the face would look like after like doing stuff with computers. Well, I've seen it done before. They add the muscle tissue and the stuff, and then they have, nowadays, probably a very accurate depiction of what the face looked like. But in the 1930s, I know that they could do stuff with clay and stuff.
Before they had computer programs to do it all for them, they'd used to do it physically with plasticine. So like you said, they would add on the muscle tissue and then add the skin layers on top of that, and it would give them a pretty accurate representation of the face. Now it's obviously more accurate because they're using technology to do it for them. But on the basis of that, you can know that the structure of the skull will give an incredibly accurate representation of what their face looked like. If they can recreate a face just from the skull with using plasticine, then you know that certain characteristics will be evident on the face dependent on certain structures in the skull. So if you've got a cleft palate, for example, that will be reflected in your skull, in your mandible. So I've never had any experience either learning or seeing this particular technique being used, but I don't find it particularly surprising that they could superimpose the image of the X-ray onto a picture of her during life and be able to give a confirmational ID. Now, it was challenged in court and was one of the reasons that Buck appealed his conviction. He said that because it was all done by one person, that the evidence submitted was subjective. So it's basically one person's opinion that this is a positive match. I haven't seen the image and I've not seen it being done before, so I can't tell you how accurate the representation was or could be. But given how it is established anthropology to be able to recreate faces from skulls, I don't find it too much of a stretch to be able to imagine that it was well done. And also the Supreme Court upheld the original evidence. They at no point ever threw it out as subjective evidence. So it must have been conclusive enough to be able to match.
Well, as we probably know by this time, it was Isabella, but I can't imagine it being that far along in the 1930s that they could recreate an exact face or that they could see the likeness that much from an X-ray to a photo, but it must have been alike enough, I'm guessing.
I think the clearest way that they would have been able to tell is to either reduce the X-ray or enlarge the picture so that they're both within the same ratios.
Yeah.
And then as you superimpose the skull over the picture, you're looking for anything that doesn't match the two pictures.
Yeah.
So if her chin is protruding too much, for example,
like mine,
then
that will be very clear in my skull that I have a very big chin.
Or if the eye sockets are too high or too low in comparison to the forehead, you can actually determine exactly where the nose and ears are on a face from the skull.
Yeah. I would be a handsome man. I have a good jawline.
Will you stop talking about yourself for 5 seconds?
Yeah. No, I get it. It would be alike enough. They would look for discrepancy.
So there's actually a mathematical formula for working out where the ears are positioned based on things like the eye socket ratios and how big the forehead is and things like that. So they would look at all of that, and also things like if one side of the face, when the skull was superimposed, had like too thick a layer of skin, if you know what I mean, and things like that. So I think there would have been enough to be able to make a positive enough ID that, combined with all of the other evidence, was conclusive enough. Yeah. Again, all of the evidence in this case, like the last one, is all circumstantial, apart from MJ.
Yeah, the fingerprints and the... Yeah. I have a historical side note. When they found Richard III underneath the parking lot, you know...
I know, because you bring him up every time.
Because they could genetically identify him as Richard III because of his ancestors. They could do a render of what his face looked like. And that, to me, is so cool. There was portraits of him, but to see his actual face, because nowadays they're so exact because of the computers. Computers. It was just so cool. I was like, that's what he looked like. I can't believe it. I was flabbergasted.
Just because you're a history nerd.
Yeah.
Do you want to know my reaction to when they positively ID'd Richard III?
What?
Oh, cool. It was Richard III.
They've also rendered a face of ancient Egypt's most written about female, like
Cleopatra.
Looks-wise. Everyone was like, oh, Nefertiti was so beautiful. She was incredibly beautiful, blah, blah, blah.
Not as beautiful as Helen.
Oh, Helen of Troy.
Yeah, she had a face that launched 1,000 ships.
I got it because it was a history joke. No, they did a re-render of her face. She's quite...
And funny story, she's fugly.
No, she's quite beautiful, actually.
She looks like the Elephant Man.
No.
Oh, how standards of beauty change.
Oh, yeah. So during the trial, the only witness for the defense was Buck, who, when the judge told him to answer the prosecutor's questions, dramatically sobbed, "I humbly beg your pardon, but don't you see how he's driving me into a corner?" Acting. You're welcome.
Did you ever consider the stage as a career? I can just see you in Macbeth.
When asked to explain the blood-stained suit, he told the court that it was an accumulation of 2 or 3 years of blood from patients. The prosecutor shot back that wouldn't that be a serious risk of infection to your patients? To which Buck gave a long and nonsensical explanation about how infection comes from the doctor's mouth. and then dramatically illustrated his explanation by wiping his handkerchief over his mouth several times. He also threw a tantrum, thumped the railing, and cried that he had nothing to hide, like a little bitch.
Didn't he also try to claim that the significant amount of blood that was found in his house, down the stair railings and on the walls and through all of his barn-like straw, could have naturally occurred during menstruation cycles?
What?
It was like, no, this is just normal from, bleeding women and shit.
What? We read the same Wikipedia article. I don't remember this being mentioned.
I'm sure he was like, nah, it's normal bloodshed from ovulation, innit?
I bleed like a stabbed pig when I menstruate. That would
Lucky listeners.
That would never, ever, in any circumstance, be accurate.
I mean, I've been to your flat and it does look like an abattoir.
That's fucking crazy. He was a stupid son of a bitch, wasn't he? Oh, God.
And that was the standard of doctors in the 1930s.
Thank God we've moved on. Speaking of blood, no, I'm just kidding. Buck Ruxton was executed by hanging in 1936, and the following day his confession was published in a Sunday newspaper. Buck had instructed it to be published only after his execution, and he also said that if I get acquitted or win my appeal, the letter is supposed to be returned to me without being opened. And at first I was like, which newspaper would actually follow those instructions? But I guess
it was the 1930s.
Yeah,
it's a gentleman's honourable code.
Yeah. His confession was probably not sincere in any way either, but yeah, that's the case. I think I'm gonna, tomorrow and on Tuesday I'm gonna edit the episode because that's gonna take a fucking year, isn't it?
Wow.
Wow. But other than that, I have no plan.
And then it's Christmas.
It's Christmas time, it's Christmas time.
Christmas time, oh, Christmas time. I hate all the tinsel.
I don't do tinsel in my house. I find it aggressively glittery. I do like wearing glittery things, but I don't like it on other things.
I hate glitter.
I have glitter in my face.
Glitter?
Glitter. I have glitter on my face, on my clothes.
You know what I think of glitter.
Yeah, it gets everywhere.
It's the syphilis of the decoration world.
It's the syphilis of the decoration.
I think we found our quote for this episode.
Highly transmittable, yes.
Gets everywhere, can't get rid of it. Doesn't matter how much you wash, it's still there. Transferred by contact. Syphilis.
Makes sense. Syphilis.
Or glitter.
Syphilis.
Syphilis. Yeah, I got that reference.
Yeah. Okay, Merry Christmas.
Don't forget to tell them we're fucking off for a week.
Oh yeah, I'm getting ready for the outro. Here we go.
Syphilis. Gonorrhea. Herpes.
Herpes. Speaking of which,
We've contracted sexually transmitted diseases. We need to go on a vigorous course of anti-prophylactics. We won't be here for a week. Bye, fuckers.
We're gonna take a week off for the Christmas holiday, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
See ya.
What? What was that on?
See ya.
Oh, see ya. I was like, I don't know what sexually transmitted disease that is. Turns out it wasn't one. It was just a poor attempt at being street.
It's an ear disease.
What kind of sex are you having that you get ear diseases?
Reoccurring every week. It's you and me.
Yeah, that still sounds like you're having sex by being fucked in the ear.
Yeah, alright. I'm gonna hang up now.
Bye.
Bye.